When it comes to buying gear for a home studio, there's two things that I think we should all prioritize: value and versatility. You don't want to spend the most that you can possibly spend unless you have that kind of money. But for most of us, we don't want to spend the most that we can possibly spend. We want to get something that's a really good value, and we want to get something that's versatile that we can use in a lot of different contexts and shape to the tone of what we're recording. And so for that reason, and with that in mind, I want to show you two pieces of gear from Samson: the Q9X and the HighRise, which is an inline mic booster that has some tone controls to it, and why I think that they're two pieces of gear that we should really consider having in our studio for value and versatility. Welcome back to the Band Guide. I'm your band guy, Colin, and today, as I said in the intro, we are talking about the Samson Q9X and the Samson HighRise, which go together to provide a lot of versatility and a lot of value that you can use in your home studio to record all sorts of things. And that's the goal of this video, is to show you how you can use these pieces of equipment on acoustic guitar and vocals and electric guitar to get really great recordings, and how they can be tailored based on the different settings that they have to really work with the sound that you are bringing into your music. And that's the versatility piece that is so important. Now, before we get into it, I just have to say Samson did send me this microphone and the HighRise, and actually this Q9U, which is the predecessor to the Q9X, and we'll talk about that a little bit in just a little bit. But there's no money exchanging hands. They are not sponsoring this video. They just said, hey, what do you think of this gear? Would you want to share it with your audience? And I tested it out, and honestly, I do want to share it with you because I think it's really cool, and it's gear that I wish that I'd known about when I was buying microphones around these price points. So I think it's going to be really valuable for you. But let's go and get into it. Let's start by talking just about the features, what comes with this actual microphone and with the HighRise. So this microphone is a large diaphragm dynamic microphone, which is a little bit unique. It's a little bit more like something like the Shure SM57 or a Shure SM7B, one of those microphones that you see in like every podcast video you've ever seen, because it's a larger diaphragm, and that allows it to get a little bit more body and warmth out of whatever it is that it's recording. But because of some of the tonal features it has, it can also get really good articulation and presence out of what it's recording. So if you look on the back of this microphone, let me get it to focus, it has a mid boost, so it can be in either flat or mid boosted mode, and that brings out more presence. It's more of like a mid presence boost than like a low mid boost. It's not a muddy mid. It's a very present, appealing mids that doesn't quite get into the harshness range. So really cool tonal option. And then the HighRise is an inline mic booster. So dynamic microphones like this tend to be quieter microphones. So it's hard to get a good level out of them without having to turn your preamp up so much that you start getting noise from the preamp. If you've ever heard just kind of that hiss, that low level hiss in your recordings, that often is coming from noise in your preamp. So an inline mic booster like this is just going to add more volume from this microphone before it even hits your preamp. And it does that with phantom power from your interface. And this HighRise can do either 20 decibels or 30 decibels of boost. And it also has a third option, which is 20 decibels with a high boost, which is kind of like a high shelf, adding a sheen on the top of your recordings. It's almost like an air switch, right? It also has a 120 hertz high pass filter, which is just going to roll off the low end, so you're not going to get too much excessive rumble or air from your microphone. I'm actually running this microphone right now, the Q9U, through the HighRise with the 120 hertz high pass filter engaged. You can hear there's still plenty of body and warmth from my vocals, but there's none of that excessive low end. So that's really cool. So that's the HighRise. And as I said, these things go together to give you a lot of recording options. And in a minute, we'll talk about the differences with the Q9U. But let's go and get into some of the recording options that you can do with this, starting with vocals. Now, with vocals, you really want to match the microphone to the singer, because different voices have very different characters. Now, some people have really strong sibilant S's that are just really harsh, and so a really bright microphone might add too much of that harshness and make it almost unlistenable. Some people have really thin vocals and need something that's going to add more body to their vocals, and this is where you get some extra versatility from this. So what I want to do in this segment is I'm going to show you this microphone compared to an AT2020, which is a similarly priced condenser microphone that a lot of people use for vocals in a home studio, and show you how it can be a very different sounding microphone and a very similar sounding microphone depending on what you need. So for some people, if you just want a very warm sounding vocal, you don't want it to be too bright, you could just keep this on flat and only use a boost on here, not any of the high lift functionality, and get a nice even sound from your vocal. Let's listen to just a quick example of that.
Kiss my neck, I fall apart again. Light me up, now we start again.
So you'll notice that it's nice and even. This is great for genres that don't want a lot of brightness, indie rock or folk music, things that are looking for warmer tones and less brightness and presence. But if you want just a little bit more presence, just a little bit more cut from the vocal, but you don't want to go into a nice airy vocal, then you can just flip this mid switch on the back of this microphone on and it's going to give you a little bit more presence. Let's listen to that.
Kiss my neck, I fall apart again. Light me up, now we start again.
So it has a little bit more presence, but it's not quite that airy vocal like you have in a lot of modern records. This is great for a lot of vocals, a lot of genres. In fact, the example I'm going to give you at the end, the vocals that we recorded were with that setting, with just the mid-boost setting. At the end, you're going to hear an entire song that I've put together where we've re-recorded all the main parts of the song with just this microphone, and I've not processed it at all other than a little bit of compression, no EQ, nothing like that. And you can hear just the tone of this microphone and how it can fit in a song that's unmixed, relatively unmixed. Now, for the last example, this is like the very modern vocal sound, that bright, airy vocal sound. This is great in a lot of rock, a lot of pop, a lot of country, a lot of rap. It's very common to have this super airy, super bright, super present vocal sound. And that's where the HighRise can really be a big help. If you flip on the high frequency lift function, if I just flip it on right now, you'll hear my vocals all of a sudden very airy, very bright. And if we do that, then this starts to compare much closer to a condenser microphone. So I'm going to have the Q9X compared to an Audio-Technica AT2020, which is a very common condenser microphone that's at a similar price point to this microphone. So you can hear the difference and the similarities. The things that I hear that are similar is the overall tone, the brightness, very similar, but then there's a little bit more warmth and body that comes from the Q9X. So check it out.
Kiss my neck, I fall apart again. Light me up, now we start again. Kiss my neck, I fall apart again. Light me up, now we start again.
So you can hear it's nice and bright and airy, very similar to a condenser. But if you were someone who had really harsh S's, it might overemphasize those S's. If you go back and listen to that again, the S's all of a sudden jump out much more, which isn't necessarily a problem on her voice, but on some voices it can start to become problematic, be too harsh, especially once you start to process it with compression and stuff like that. So having the option to not have that extra high shelf that you get, or that high frequency lift that you get from a condenser microphone or most condenser microphones, and being able to just flip it off on the HighRise box is a really cool option. So that's vocals. You really want to tailor it to the singer and get a sound that works with them and emphasizes the right things and gives you the tone that's right for your genre. Now, the next example I want to give you is the Q9X and the AT2020 again on acoustic guitar. Now, you could do this flat. You could do this with the mid presence boost. But to me, I do think with acoustic guitar, most of the time I'm looking for that high frequency sheen, and this combination gives a great version of that. You do the high frequency lift here and you do the mid boost here, and then you get the body that this microphone inherently has, but you can still get kind of that clarity and presence that you get from a condenser microphone. So again, I want to show you this microphone against the AT2020 on acoustic. Now, if you wanted a darker tone, you could always turn off the high frequency lift. You could turn off the mid boost. You could really tailor it to the sound of your acoustic. A lot of acoustics sound very different, but you have those tonal options with this, which is just cool in my opinion. Okay, let's listen to some electric guitar. Now, this is an electric guitar amp, and I am using the Q9X compared to the Shure SM57. Again, pretty similarly priced microphones. This is kind of like the industry standard for just a dynamic microphone on an electric guitar. And what I noticed immediately with this, trying to get as similar of a mic placement as I could relative to the cone, is that the Q9X just had way more body and fullness. This had an interesting upper mid-range thing going on. As soon as I flipped on the mid boost with this, it started to get a bite that I felt was smoother in the upper end while still cut through. I could have used the high frequency lift, but I liked that it wasn't inherently on there, and I decided that I felt like that was adding a little bit too much in the high end. And so ultimately I went with the Q9X just with the mid boost on, and just check it out. Now, I like the sound of both of those. If you heard that 57 and you thought, I like the sound of that, maybe even better, there's nothing wrong with either of those sounds. It's really just what serves your song. And in this case, I actually like and was looking for more of that low mid tone. And maybe I could have got there with the 57, depending on where I placed it on the speaker. But I tried a lot of different things, and ultimately the Q9X, honestly, for me on that part, gave me more of the tone that I was looking for faster. And that mid boost gave me kind of a smoother upper mid-range bump than you have on a 57. So it's just about options, and having options is really great in a studio, because the better recordings that you can get that serve the individual sources that you're recording, the better the final product is going to come, and the better the mix is going to come together, because it already is going to sound more mixed than if you were to just record it aimlessly by just throwing up a microphone wherever and not thinking too much about mic placement and the tone of the microphone and the mic selection. So I don't want you to get bogged down in options, but if you don't have any options, having a second microphone can be really great, because there's some things that will just sound better on a different microphone, and it can be as simple as just putting up both microphones and listening to which one you like better and going with that. So if you don't have a second microphone, the Q9X could be a really cool second microphone for you. If you don't have any microphones at all, up until now, I've always recommended a large diaphragm condenser, but I think for a lot of people, the Q9X could actually be a better first microphone, because it gives you so many tonal options. Now, you do need to pair it with the HighRise. The only example I didn't use the HighRise on there was the electric guitar, just because that amp was wildly loud and I had plenty of gain just from my interface. But the HighRise is going to give you a bunch of extra clean gain, and then it also gives you that high lift, which can be really helpful, and it can give you the low cut, which can be helpful to cut out rumble. So now that we've gone through some individual examples, I want to show you an entire song where I've re-recorded all the main elements, the electric guitars, the vocals, the acoustic guitars, re-recorded them with nothing but the Samson Q9X and the HighRise. And the only thing I did on those tracks was a little bit of dynamic control on the vocals, so they'd sit a little bit better in the mix, and a little bit of dynamic control on the acoustics, compressors in both cases. And that is the only mixing that I did, yet it sounds fairly mixed already. So with a little bit of EQ, a little bit of effects, I'd be able to get a really great end result, and all I'm using is this Q9X. And by the way, this is the Q9X. I switched over from the Q9U because before we listen to that, I just want to talk really quickly about the differences with these two mics. So the Q9U actually came out first, and you can tell when it's a Q9U because it has this black grill versus the gray or silver grill. You might hear a couple of plosives here because I took the additional windscreen off. Generally speaking, without the additional windscreen, this does a pretty good job catching plosives anyway. But the difference with the Q9U is that it also can operate as your interface. Now, a lot of times I recommend and still prefer having an interface because it's a higher quality preamp. But if you're ever in a situation where you don't have access to an interface, you could just plug with a USB connection. You can see the USB-C connection right here, so you can connect that directly to your computer. And it also has a headphone output and a high-pass filter integrated into it. Then it also has a mute switch, which is pretty cool. It doesn't indicate if it's on or off with the light or anything, but you can feel that it's pushed in or not pushed in. So that's pretty cool. So all of those features come on the Samson Q9U, and they are not on the Samson Q9X. The Samson Q9X only has the mid boost. This also has the mid boost. But I would say none of those features are a deal breaker or make or break feature for most people. If you're recording, if you already have an interface, you don't need the USB-C connectivity most likely, unless you're traveling a lot or something like that. traveling a lot and need to record. So you don't necessarily need the USB-C connectivity, and the high pass filter on this is a little bit higher, so I actually wouldn't recommend using it in most cases because you could accidentally cut out some of the low mid-range that you might actually want on your source in order for it to feel full. So I actually wouldn't use the high pass filter that's on here for recording really anything in the musical world. You could do that later. And then the USB and the headphone jack, those are, and the mute switch, they're really just if you need this while you're traveling or if you're doing a lot of podcasting or using this for Zoom calls or something like that, they can be pretty convenient. A mute switch also, obviously, sometimes you can accidentally mute and then not record something you thought you just recorded, and that can be frustrating. But this is a great option, and honestly, it might be the one that I end up using here more often since I'm doing a lot of voiceover stuff for the band guide. But in the studio, I'd probably get the Q9X. But if you need a USB functionality, the Q9U is a great option as well. Anyway, we're going to finish up with the video, but before we do, I just want to ask if you could let me know down in the comments what you think of the Q9X, the HighRise, the Q9U, how you think they sound in the full song version, if there are any individual examples you like. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below, and if there's any other gear you want me to review, let me know in the comments below as well. If this video was helpful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video. But in the meantime, check out this re-recorded version of Big Dream by my band Broke Royals using the Samson Q9X and Samson HighRise. Check it out.
Big dream, baby, big dream. Tell me it's real, baby, I'll believe you. Tell me this here's and I'll never leave you. I'll never leave you. Tell me you're sold and I'm on your team. Never gets old, it's a big, big dream. It's a big, big dream. Come on now, dream, baby, dream.